Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Bado, how are you?
Good, good. Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, nice to meet
So,
you.
I've heard a lot of things about you. I know that you've got a pretty big personal brand, and could you just tell everyone what is it that you do and where are you guys at?
When you say where we are at, you're thinking in terms of revenue, growth, team.
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we are a lead generation agency, and we leverage AI to gain the edge, on the competition. Just because one thing I've realized, working with an AI agency a few years ago, is that like the potential for technology is so huge that you can essentially apply this technology to, I mean, any kind of topics. And so at the moment we are a 21 person lead generation agency, and this is one part of the business. And the other part of the business is we help GTM teams find tools and build our tech stack. And so this is something we are planning to invest more time on. But at the moment, the main business, what makes say 85% of our revenue, is the agency.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. And where like what niches are you guys working with and what's your offer specifically? I know that it's around cold email. Do you guys have anything else?
So what we do cold email, we do LinkedIn automation, but also now we also do CRM implementation. We set up inbound workflows, and we recently added LinkedIn ads on top of our service offering. And then when it comes to cold email itself, we have some productized offerings. So for example, like you could not want to have a full um, cold email service setup, but you could want to have some help with your email deliverability, for example. And so that's something we do as well, where for some companies we just manage their deliverability setup.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question, and I think you're the perfect person to ask, is like now the space is always changing in outbound. Like, what tech stack should people or companies be using, or what are you guys using specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess the best way to answer the question is to actually divide this by budget. Because obviously, if you're an enterprise company, a startup, a scale up, or you're just starting, it's going to be different. And so I'll say that if you're just starting out and you have a very low budget, then you would want to have just one to two tools. And so in these instances, what I would do is I would have one platform that you could call it all-in-one prospecting platform. So you can think of platforms like Apollo, Lemlist, Instantly, who within their tool they have a database and they also have sales engagement capabilities. And because they've got all of these within a single tool, you can get away with just paying one subscription. But the downside to having an all-in-one platform is that they're not gonna be as good in every department. And so if you have a higher budget and you're looking for, say, specialized solutions, then there are some interesting things you can do. Like, for example, using a tool like Clay. So for example, like Clay, they would be the king of data enrichment, which means that you can go very deep in terms of, leveraging intent signals, in terms of enriching data, in terms of finding a lot of information around each person you want to reach out to. And then you can combine this with the sales engagement platform, and so you can make a combo of, say, Instantly plus Clay or Lemlist plus Clay. And having a simple tech stack like this would cover most of your needs. Now, for in our case, because we are a lead gen agency with over 50 clients, we've got a lot of niche use cases, which means that sometimes we need to know about, say, company technology. So in these instances, we would use Build-Tweet. Sometimes we need to scrape e-commerce websites. So we would use a website like Store Leads. And if it's Amazon, it would be like some specialized solutions. In the most case, I will say if you're starting out, you do Lemlist or Instantly plus Clay, and that's gonna be great already. But if you wanna be fancy, I can recommend a lot of other solutions. But I would advise for you to just go on the Call Like You website and look at our list of AI sales tools. We are always open to answer any question for, say, custom needs.
Yeah, and so it seems like clay is a big part of it. Where does that come in, and what's the use case?
I mean, clay, you can think of clay as, some super spreadsheets. But say, for me, like, what's interesting with clay is within their platform, they integrate somewhere around 50 to 100 different data sources, which means that almost any data point you want to find, you should be able to find it using clay. And when it comes to outbound, I think that the most important part is to be reaching out to the right person. Just because, if you just look at open your mailbox, something you'll notice is that you just get a lot of irrelevant messages. And so the only messages you would want to reply to will be the ones where when you read them, you think, okay, there is no way this message was sent was meant to anyone else, right? And so that's what you can do with clay in a very advanced way is you can actually layer data points. That means that the person you're reaching out to is the right person. So just to give an example, is let's say you've got a company. I mean, like let's take the example of Call Like You. As a company, we sell lead generation services, and one part of this, I mean, like the major part of this, is cold email services. And so, one thing we would want to know if we reach out to companies to sell them our cold email services is are they even interested in cold email services? And so, there's no way to know for sure, but you can build some assumptions. And so, for example, one assumption I can kind of build is let's say someone just recently installed a cold email software, and there is a high likelihood that they will ramp up their cold email activities. And so maybe they have got the expertise in the house, but maybe they don't. And in this instance, then my message would be relevant. And so what I want to do typically is I want to try to build some hypothesis as to why someone would be interested in just contracting our services. And once you build, and building this hypothesis usually mean finding the data points that confirm or that allow you to test your hypothesis. And so when you do that and you go pretty deep in terms of who you want to target, in terms of field segmentation, then you realize that you need a pretty advanced tool such as Clay. And so there are a few competitors, like competitors slash copycats that popped up, but to this day, in terms of finding data, Clay is by far the best.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, they're growing like crazy, and everyone's using them everywhere. Everyone I ask. So, with the agency itself, how do you guys get clients? Is it primarily through cold emails? I know you guys have a big LinkedIn presence as well.
Yeah, so we get a lot of clients from LinkedIn, and typically, like I would say, like the main difference between LinkedIn and cold emails is that if I reach out to you via cold email and I book a meeting with you, you have very little context on me, which means that the frame is I have to pitch you hard, maybe not hard, but it's just not as easy to close as someone who discovers you from content. Because what happens with LinkedIn is that when people book a call with our team, they usually have been following us for some time, which means that you've probably been exposed to 30, 40 content pieces from me or from my team. And very often, by the time people jump into a call, they're already sold. And so, inbound has some advantages, outbound has some other advantages. For example, with inbound, it's pretty difficult to know how many people will be exposed to your post because you can't control the algorithm. With outbound, it's like if you send 1,000 emails and you have on average 60% open rate, you know that you have 600 people that will be seeing your email. So so outbound has this predictability, but inbound compound pretty well over the long term. And so, instead of trying to find out which one of these motion is the best, we actually combine both. And this is kind of the system that brings us the most leads. So essentially, we post a lot of content, on a lot of platforms, LinkedIn being the main one, and we just look at who's showing some interest. And so showing interest can mean someone looking at your profile, someone engaging with your post, someone visiting your website, someone registering to your newsletter, And then all of these people, and we reach out to them. And typically, what we want to do is we don't want to be too pushy because we know that these are people that are being, say, educated by us or that are in our ecosystem at the moment. So the goal is not to be like, hey, book a meeting with us, but it's just to facilitate a conversation, as in, just making it easy for people to talk with us.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so there's inbound, there's outbounds, there's also where you mix both of them, which is a lot of what you guys do as well. When do you think somebody should go for inbound, outbound, or both of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess that there's two ways to answer that, because it's when I'm saying two ways, I mean it's dependent on the type of business you run, and it's also dependent on the stage you're on. So, because I think some businesses are extremely tricky to scale via outbound, and then, the opposite is true. Some businesses are just extremely tricky to scale via inbound. How do you know? I mean, typically you just try it, and then you'll know. But also, most importantly, when you just start a business, when you do create content in the beginning, you will have very few people seeing your content. That's just the nature of social media. You start with a new account, you got zero follower, which means that you cannot actually count on inbound to bring you a continuous stream of leads, except if you have a longer time horizon, in mind. So if you have a long-term vision for your product and you're comfortable with not booking any meetings, say for the next 3 months, then it's okay to just create content and not do any outbound, right? But so for me, what I would do is I would always start with outbound just because it's the easiest way to validate your message. As I mentioned, with inbound, you don't know how many people will see what you post. If you've been posting for some time, you know that your content will be exposed to a lot of people. But with outbound, it's much more predictable. And so, what I've done personally is I found all of our first clients. I found them via outbound. I ran some campaigns. My first one, two campaigns were a complete fail just because I tried to pitch something slightly different and I didn't target the right person. But then, as I started understanding who was resonating with my message, I started creating content knowing that I shouldn't expect too much from happening in the first few months. And so it did take, say, a couple of months before I started getting a continuous stream of leads. And even though we are an outbound agency, I'll be honest, I prefer the inbound leads we are getting. And so I recommend most businesses to start with outbound, test out their messages, and at the same time slowly build a, say, content slash inbound strategy, but you want to have a longer time horizon. And the reason why you want to do both at the same time is because while inbound is not bringing you any leads yet, you can count on outbound to sign some clients, generate some revenue, and then at some point hopefully inbound will overtake the amount of clients you sign through outbound.
So when you're doing like that outbound to test the messaging to just see if there's demand for your offer, for your ICP as well, what sort of, because I know that some people they say, oh, don't use any personalization when you're doing that because you're just trying to test it. Like what, how do you go about in terms of the script or the angle of the email?
Yeah, I actually think you should use personalization. I feel, there is the founder of Y Combinator, Paul Graham, he's got this quote that says, "Do things that don't scale." And so following the logic of what you were saying that people are saying, that would just means people are trying to scale the approach before knowing if it works, right? Which means that what people are doing is just thinking, okay, let me build a list, test this message, and put it in front of 1,000 people. And if it doesn't work, let me put another random message in front of another 1,000 people. But I think the approach is backwards. I feel you should do the complete opposite. You should just think of, okay, who do I want ideally as client? Who do I think I can serve? Who do I think I can provide the most value to? and then actually reach out to these people manually, one by one. And so what I would do in the very beginning is I would just look at your profile, your LinkedIn profile, if I wanted to reach out to you, and then I would try to find something interesting. It's like, what's what is it? What is Paolo? Excuse me. What is Paolo posting about? What is he doing that could mean that he would be a good fit for my services, and how can I show him that? And if I do this with you, and I do it with a second person, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, then at some point I will find some patterns. So the first thing is I will find a pattern where I'm saying, okay, I can say this. I mean, like, typically this looks like a good sign that Paolo is interested in my services, but also these other guys, because the common point of people who seem to be interested in my offering is that they are posting on LinkedIn. Say if you're selling ghostwriting services, but then because I'm sending the message in a slightly different message, I get some feedback straight away, and then by this process of iteration, I'm then able to land on a message and say filtering criteria that I can now try to scale to 1,000 people. Because once I've got the work, say for 15, 20 people, now I can think, okay, every time someone replied positively to me when I did this manual outreach, they all had, been posting, say, like, for the last 3 weeks, but they had just recently started, and they all had less than 1,000 followers. And so, for example, maybe this combination of three criterias is a great combination to find people interested in your services. But the only way you find these is because you are, actively looking at each of your target profile, and you are seeing some patterns, just by observing profile one after the other, instead of making some assumptions just too much in advance.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, um, with campaigns where maybe it's more like inbound led outbound or warm outreach, what I've noticed and when I speak to people, they say, "Oh, when I tell them like, oh, I just saw you were on my website, or I saw you commented on a post," they think that it's like a bit strange, or that you're doing something sketchy. How do you go about actually creating those types of campaigns which are gonna generate leads?
Yeah, I think that you should avoid as much as possible saying that you've noticed that people were on your website. Um, and there are a few exceptions to this, and I'm going to talk about these. But for the most part, people are pretty scared about being tracked and so and that sort of stuff, which means that you can be reaching out to people, but not even mentioning that. So, for example, in your instance, let's say I'm selling LinkedIn ghostwriting services, and then I see someone visiting my website. So they've been visiting my website. I have this information, but they don't need to know that I have got this information. Which means that as I've got the information that someone visited my website, I could then just look at their LinkedIn profile and see if they've been posting recently. And what I would do is I would just say, hey, like, looks like you've been posting recently. Not sure if you're familiar with what I do, but, and then you would introduce yourself, and you actually know that they know you, and you just don't mention it. And the thing is, the fact that they were on your website and that they were posting just give you the information that it might be the right time to reach out to. But by not mentioning that you have the technology that identifies them, you avoid making it weird. And so, and I said that there are some exceptions to this because, for example, let's say you are one of these platforms, you kind of need to educate people around that. So any visitor identification platform like Airbnb or Instantly, if they want to sell the technology, they kind of need to say, hey, I know that you were on my website because I've got this technology that identifies you. And in our case, we actually made the choice in our own campaigns to mention this just because we always talk about tech. And so, in my mind, because we're educating people around tech, I'm actually using the fact that it's a bit weird that I know you're on my website to talk about the fact that there are a lot of techs that do lots of stuff. And I'm just telling you, hey, by the way, like, if you wonder how I knew that I were on your website, I use these tools, and I can even joke with people and say crazy what these tools can do. Um, but the thing is, we've got say 1,000 plus sales tech on our website because we are the tech people. Then it's kind of our job to know about tech, and so I don't think it's too bad that some people are weirded out by the fact that we use this kind of tech.
Okay. And with the follow-ups, how many follow-ups or what's the average amount of like follow-ups? And also, do you send like gifts? Do you send the basic reminders? How do you go about actually getting people to not ghost you?
Yeah, I mean, some people will ghost you. There's just no way around that. It's like even if you like, for example, even me in my case, I get say thousands of cold emails every week, and so maybe I'm exaggerating on this one though. Maybe it's per month. So the truth is, I'm not even looking at my own LinkedIn inbox just because it takes too much time. And so there are some people I want to talk with who, sometimes send me emails and I just miss them just because of the volume or just because of the fact that the person who manages my inbox, like didn't catch the message from the person and so on. And then, sometimes I'm vacationing. And so when I come back, just looking at the message from the last week, but I missed, the one from the week before. So there are like plenty of reasons why people won't reply to you. And I think, you shouldn't take it personally. It's just the name of the game. And so because of this, um, I think that you shouldn't. So you should try to make sure that if people don't reply to you, it's because they didn't want to reach out to you. But at the same time, I think it's best to maximize the number of people who know about what you do than to maximize the number of touch points you send to people. Meaning back in the day, people used to do some 15-step sequences, as if on my 14th email to you, you would be like, okay, let me reply to Mish now. He's been pretty persistent. But what we see, and that's I guess a consensus in the agency community with people who have big urban agencies is that you usually get better results with shorter sequences, putting more people in these. Meaning that I'd rather reach out to 2,000 people and send them two messages. So that would mean 4,000 messages, than reach out to 1,000 people and send them four. And in most cases, and you can actually A/B test that so that you don't have to take my word for it. But in most cases, you will get better replies this way.
Yeah, okay, super, super valuable. And I know you said LinkedIn drives a lot of the traffic. I wanted to get into that a bit. So, what are the main strategies you guys used? Well, first of all, in the beginning, to start actually getting your first inbounds, and then afterwards, how did you scale that up?
So you're asking about LinkedIn strategies specifically?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I was actually looking back at my oldest post yesterday, because now it's 2025, and I realized that the first time I published on LinkedIn was 2022. And it's funny because when you look back at your old posts, you really see the difference in terms of the quality. Like just it's really true that doing something every day will have a huge impact on like your improvement. But for me, I've my first realization when it came to generating leads with LinkedIn is that the questions I was getting from people jumping on a call with me were in the most cases the same questions that the people who would want or would have the potential to jump on a call with me would be asking. So to give you an example, back in the days, I think in a single week I had 10 calls, and 7 out of 10 people told me, "Oh, I wish the reason I'm calling you is because I'm sending those cold email campaigns and I'm landing in the spam folder. I don't know what to do." And it was 7 out of 10 people who told me that. which was weird because when I was posting about spam on LinkedIn, it just wasn't a very popular topic. People prefer to hear about AI personalization. But I just realized that AI personalization is a nice to have. If you don't know how to do AI personalization, you can still get results. If you don't know how to land in the main inbox, then you're just stuck because nobody is seeing your email. Meaning that by talking about deliverability, I would have much fewer people liking or engaging with my post, but all of the people who did resonate with the post were at a point where they needed some help, which means that it would book some calls. And so I guess that's the takeaway here is really when people book calls with you, you want to understand why are they booking a call with you? What's the exact situation they are going through that makes them book a call? Because that's the first thing you want to address when it comes to your LinkedIn post. And so yeah, this is the first point.
So how do you go about getting ideas for those posts? So something that I usually tell like my friends and my clients and stuff, and I do for myself as well, is like list out all the problems that you solve for the ICP, and then try to solve those with a post each one. Are
Yeah,
there any ways that you guys go about writing posts?
yeah. Now that I think about it, I don't even really have a process. I because I think that what happened with us is I started posting, and then I just in the beginning forced myself to find some content ideas. And in the beginning, I was just like trying to share everything I knew about cold email. So I was thinking, okay, if you think of cold emails, you can compartmentalize that into building a list. But building a list is essentially scraping data plus enriching data. So it's like, okay, how do you scrape data? And I would just explain how I scrape data. And it's like, how do you enrich data? And then I would explain how I get a max enrichment rate when it comes to enriching data. And then you go at the next step. Say you want to send some emails. Before you send some emails, you want to make sure you've got a good email deliverability infrastructure. So I was like, okay, how do I do this to make sure I've got high open rates? And then I would share this with people. And so in the beginning, this is what I've done. And then as I did that, I started seeing what kind of post would have a good, say, balance between how many people would be reached and how many people decided to book a meeting with me. And so I just started doing more of these. And now it's just pretty intuitive. I actually don't have any strategy. I think maybe I should come up with a strategy, but it's mostly whatever I can come up with that I feel brings some value, I will post about.
Yeah, I think that's also where you end up getting the best ideas and the best posts is the ones which just come like naturally. Also, that's why they have like the shower thoughts, because that's when you're not stimulated by your phone. You're just it's just you and your brain, you're just
Yeah.
thinking, and then you come up with some really good ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like sometimes like when you start getting into the habit of writing LinkedIn posts, then you think about it, I mean, all day. Because it's pretty addictive, right? It's like, for example, I know some people when they wake up in the morning, they look at Instagram. I open my LinkedIn account. And so I remember when I started posting, I would be in the sauna and then I would be like, oh shit, I've got this great idea now. And then I would almost want to get out of the sauna, go in the changing room, uh, put it on my phone, just because I would be scared that I would forget the ID, and ID would just come up at all times. And so what I started doing, I mean, I would just write every time I would have an idea on my notes, and I just realized that the way I would come up with publications would be in 4 steps, where I would have some random thoughts and then think, okay, this could be a post. Once I would have this random thought, then I would kind of rework it, so make an actual draft of it, and then before it would be time to post, I would actually just like finalize it, review it one last time, and then I would add some design element to this. And so this is kind of how I do it now. Um, but I'm a very chaotic person, I'm like a chaotic creative type, which means that I don't think this is a way that works for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if people did have trouble, I think usually what I find is that when you consume things, it's just way easier to produce. So if you just scroll on the LinkedIn feed, then usually that puts you in the right mindset and you'll end up seeing, posts that have done well in your niche and things like that. So with like the actual types of posts, so I know you do lead magnets. You're actually probably one of the best people at doing like those graphics and gifs and stuff. So could you just break down what types of posts you guys make and why they work so well?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. The I realized it pretty early on with LinkedIn that you could write the exact same thing if you would just add a nice image, then it would say like 3x the reach of the post. So because of this, I try to understand that, but I guess what they say like an image is worth 1,000 words, and so I started just thinking about how can I explain what I'm saying in text and explain it visually. And so now, what we do is we actually take advantage of all of the LinkedIn formats that we have. So as you mentioned, we do those infographic, those schemas, where say if I want to break down a campaign or a workflow, I can write about it and explain it. But at the same time, having a schema actually, allows people to understand it as if they were taking a step back, right? You've got like the high, like say like what's the expression in English? The big picture. Yeah, you've got the big picture
Yeah.
of what the system looks like. So we do a lot of these infographics, and essentially an infographic is just like showcasing in a visual way what works for you. And so, for example, I think if you like last month, I just explained our whole acquisition funnel. I explained all of the bits, but then I did this schema where I would showcase all of our acquisition sources, then our conversion mechanism, and then the way we would close. And so like this is one of them. Then another thing we do a lot is we do carousels of tools. And that's that's also because I've always liked, talking about sales technology just in general. And so from the very beginning, I would I would create those huge list of tools. It's actually also the way I got started with the agency because I would always be looking at lots of different tools and then trying to understand how they work and how I can implement these within my processes. And doing it this way, I kind of found some hacks. And and so we do carousels of tools where it's just typically I've got say 7 to 10 tools, and I'm explaining how I use each of the tools. So this is pretty simple. You use a screenshot of the home page, and then you describe the tool very very quickly. And I think the reason it works is just because people would spend a lot of time on this kind of post. For most platforms, the way they work is they want to maximize advertising money, which means that if you're one of these person that in the eyes of LinkedIn manage to keep people longer on the platform, then they will want to expose your post to more people. And I think this is what a carousel does. Is with a carousel, you've got say people reading the text, but then they will go and look at each page of the carousel one by one, and as they do that, they maybe spend say 3 to 4 times more time on the publication. And then yeah,
Yeah.
and then like you mentioned, yeah, I think like the other two we use a lot is GIF and pictures. I think like GIF are nice. Like it's LinkedIn is a bit weird because a lot of people talk about how videos, and I would be curious to hear your experience about it. But a lot of people talk about how videos are increasing reach a lot, but I'm not seeing it that much. And so what I like to do is I like to add some small GIF, it's typically less than 10 seconds, that just show something we would do. So for example, if I'm enriching or like I'm creating a prompt inside of Clay, some AI personalized prompt, then I'm showing the prompt being executed and the output because like it's a great way to showcase it. But from the eyes of LinkedIn, it's considered an image. And the thing with GIF, I think, is because if it goes fast, because they typically tend to go fast, people actually wanna look at them back, say like 3 to 4 times. So you see the workflow and you're like, oh, I missed it, and then you look at it, you look at it, you look at it. And so once again, I think it increases the dwell time on the post, which means once again that in the eyes of LinkedIn, uh, it's a great post, and so they will want to expose it to more people. And the last one is we like to use image, select pictures. And when I'm saying pictures, I'm not just saying pictures of yourself, I'm saying picture of the team. I think it humanizes the business a lot, as in, you know, what people see is they see a brand name, a company, like it's, just um, it's faceless, and I think people actually like seeing who who's who somehow. And so, for example, for us, we had a lot of employees post, but at the same time, we kind of showcase, the behind the scene of our team building and other activities. And I think that, funny enough, now in the beginning, people who were say head of departments or CXOs were the ones who would have, say, the most fans. But now what we are seeing is we've got a lot of people in the team who are also building their fan base because of the fact that they are also posting and, like, showing themselves on the platform.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's also something I noticed. Like I see your team on different accounts like posting. It's always like pretty similar stuff, but I think it just increases your digital surface area, I guess you could say. Yeah, I think for the short form, like I think you can get, more views. You're probably going to get more views than, if it was just text or maybe a simple image. But at the end of the day, it's mainly vanity metrics. Like you won't, the chances of converting them are so much lower, just like as if we were to post on on Instagram or TikTok. Like I think with a short form, it's hard to build trust in that time period and they're just scrolling. So the chances of them actually going to your profile, booking a call is way lower. Um, for the employee stuff, do you guys how do you guys get the employees to post? Like how do you motivate them and push them to post? Because that's definitely like a um big win if you can get everyone to just post and increase your whole company brand.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, there are a few ways. The first thing is you want to find people who are also interested to post. And typically, because of the fact that we post, people who join the company, they know it already, right? It's like if you join Code Like You, and our best hires, they actually were very familiar with our brand because they had seen us post for some time. And so a lot of people who come, they actually have this in the back end of their mind. They're thinking, I want to use this opportunity to also build my own personal brand. Like, this is one, is really, just people were already thinking of posting. Now the second thing is, and I don't know if it's just, say, my convincing skills, but in my eyes, LinkedIn, and not just LinkedIn, but building your personal brand is one of the biggest opportunity of our time. And I think about it very simply. It's just, if you have an existing set of skills and 10 people know about this, then you have way fewer chances of finding some opportunities than if 1,000 people know about this specific set of skills. And so for me, that's what it is. It's simply an amplifier, and I want to insist and say, I want to say that to everyone, whether they have own a company or they're an employee. More people knowing about you means more potential for opportunities. And so I think that most people, should try to post if their audience is on LinkedIn, when we are talking about LinkedIn posting. And this is my truth, and it's kind of something that I hammer and repeat over and over and over. And by that time, I think every person that's on my team know that this is something I believe in. I guess that some people have adopted the belief as well. And the third thing is we also incentivize them, just because at some point I ran the numbers of the impact that LinkedIn had on our business. And I think it was 6 months ago already, actually, or by the end of Q2, I computed the number of impressions we had generated on the platform, and I looked at how many meetings we booked as a consequence of generating those impressions, and how much added revenue we made. And so on this a specific quarter, we had generated over 4 million impressions, and we added $80,000 per month in monthly recurring revenue. So I thought, wait, if I can do this every quarter, I'm adding 1 million per month to my company. And if I just have to kind of, pay a few thousands to add 80,000 per month, then I think it's yeah, 'cause like I say, 1 million per year, I meant, yeah, to 80,000 per month, then I think it's a great deal. And so now we've got this internal competition where the person who has the most posts above 20 likes, because we want to keep some level of quality, gets a prize, and the second and the third person actually gain a prize as well. I think it's 2.5k euros for the first, and then maybe 1.5 and 1k. I'm not sure anymore, but that's what it is.
Oh yeah, that's super insightful. I didn't know that. That's great. And on a high level, like LinkedIn versus X versus YouTube, all the other platforms, why are you on LinkedIn? Why are you on LinkedIn specifically? And why and would you recommend to others to be on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with LinkedIn, most people don't start at zero because you already have connections, right? And so the first people that can learn about you outside of your circle will be the connection of your connections. But if you were to create a new Twitter account, you would be at zero. And so this is kind of one of the reasons why I decided to do LinkedIn. But to be honest, in the beginning, I published the same thing on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And I think I had 10 times the reach on LinkedIn. And I would be booking meetings with, people that were much more interesting in terms of um, if how likely they could be clients for me. And I decided to just focus on one channel. And so I think that's one thing, I would advise to anyone is, if you will be starting out with publishing content, I think you should focus on one channel only, because everybody, sells the dream of content repurposing, where in theory you could build one piece of content and then write an email out of it and write a blog article, then use it as a script for a YouTube video, and then like make a long form tweet, and so on and so on and so on and so on. But one part of audience growth on a platform is content creation. Another part is actually the engagement, understanding how the platform operates. If it's on LinkedIn, you should know that there are also you can also message people, which is interesting because if you message someone, then your posts are much more likely to appear on the top of their feed. And so because of this, I think I would just focus on one platform. And for me, LinkedIn was the one that brought the most results the fastest. And I think it's still one of the most untapped platforms, despite the fact that more and more people are posting. The percentage of people posting when you compare it to other platforms is just way, way, way less. And so that's the thing. So LinkedIn has been our main driver, but now we are at the point where we have, more than 10 people in the team making content on LinkedIn. We have 4 people over 10k followers. I think we have 8 people that have more than 7k followers. So I want to spread my bets, and I'm starting to do YouTube. And I think the reason why I want to do YouTube is because it has some of the things that LinkedIn doesn't have. Even though you can go in depth and explain some complex concepts on LinkedIn, you wouldn't go as much in depth as when you're on video explaining these concepts on YouTube. And so I think that it's after LinkedIn is gonna be our biggest bet, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think YouTube is next up there for B2B, at least in my opinion as well. I mean, I have clients which are making like hundreds of thousands, like William Brown, just from YouTube. He's doing really well on there, even with only like 2,000 views a video, because of the long form format. It's just so much easier to build trust.
Yeah.
Um, the last thing about like LinkedIn that I wanted to ask you was, how do you actually do outbound DMs? Like, what's the process, and what's the are there any specific ways that you go about um, the sequence or the script?
Yeah. So one thing is when you start to have a big audience on LinkedIn, don't automate your account. I think there comes a point where your account becomes too valuable for you to mess with LinkedIn, meaning that just yeah, I'd say over 5,000 followers, just don't take the risk. It's not worth it. And so for me, when it comes to say LinkedIn DMs, I guess what's great is the fact that as opposed to an email, a DM has a face attached to it. People can one click you and then see all of your experience, your background, and so on. And also, they are much more limited, right? With emails, you could create a lot of different mailboxes, and then you could send 1,000 emails every day. With LinkedIn DMs, you're limited because if you go, say, over 100 connection requests per day and over 100 DMs, then you probably will have your account restricted. And so for me, I treat LinkedIn DMs as the say most important form of communication I have, in the sense that I want to use it to reach out to the most important leads. And for me, the most important leads are a mix of people who have lots of context about me and people who are in high position in big companies. And so what I do is I look manually at people who either look at my profile, engage with my post, comment on my post, whatever it is. I would go and check their profile and I would just ask them an open question. So, you like my post, Paolo? And I would just be like, hey, so you like my post about this thing? And I would just ask you, and I would be like, oh, I'm curious if, X resonates with you, or if something specific resonates with you. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want to be pushy, for one, but second, I know that if I send you this message, there is now a very high likelihood that you will see all of my other posts. And instead of trying to nurture you by sending you a lot of emails each after the other, I can nurture you simply by knowing that you are not being exposed to my post day after day, which means that if at some point you are thinking of doing some cold email outreach, you will think of me because you are seeing me on the feed every day. And so for DMs, especially LinkedIn DMs, I try to always keep them short, conversational, and non-pushy as much as possible. Like I'm not trying to sell a meeting, whatever, just trying to open up a conversation.
Yeah, that's super valuable, and I think with that as well, you can adding personalization there, um, trying to be more, come off like more as a friend. I think also with the DMs that works well. So on a high level, like just business in general, from where you've gotten, and from where you started, where do you think what is one habit or one way of thinking that you think helped you get to where you're at right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other day. I feel like most people, when they come into business, they try to build the most fancy plan. They think about the most complex strategy. If someone shows you a super complex outbound setup or growth setup, then you think, man, this must be working because it's just so complicated. But what I realize is that, complexity, like the fact that some working system is complex, doesn't come from just it being complex for the sake of being complex, but it comes from just like very simple things that work attached to one another, and then and it kind of becomes complex. And but the reason why I'm saying this is because I think that the key to success is to define a strategy in terms of think about what would it take for me to reach my goals, and then try to define, the activities that should stem from applying this strategy, defining a timeline on, for how much time you should go about applying the strategy, and then sticking to it. Because I think the magic happens in the fact that you show up consistently. Now, when it comes to LinkedIn, someone can come up and can give you the craziest growth plan that has all of the secrets, but I will always bet on the person who has no plan and who decided that the only thing they would do is post one time per day and who would stick to it and who would do it every single day. And so yeah, and so I think that really in business the magic happens in the daily small actions and you just don't realize, but one time and at some point they compound. And I realized it, with LinkedIn because I don't think I've never, I've, I don't think I've ever been a gifted writer. But when I looked at my post from say 2 years ago, and I look at my post today, I just see how much improvement there has been. But I never realized it before I had say next to one post from before and the other post just next to it, or just see it after it just strikes you. It's like it makes sense. It's you should be improving if you do this, every single day. And so yeah, and so I think that now the way I think about it is, it's cool to just define a plan, think say 3 months, 6 months, 1 year in advance. But then once the plan is done, there are a few revenue generating activities that you want to do every day or every week. And what you want to do is you want to stick to these no matter what for the time that you set to yourself that you were gonna stick to this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great. So I think there's been a bunch of golden nuggets. Where can people find you if they want more of you?
Yeah, they can find me on YouTube or on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn it's Michel Lieben, Michel Lieben. They can find me on YouTube. It's also Michel Liben. I have fewer subscribers on YouTube, but hopefully I will catch up. And otherwise, if they want to book a meeting with our team, they can find us at coldiq.com. So cold and iq.com. And it will be with a pleasure that we'll have a conversation with them.
Great. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure, Paolo. Nice to meet you.
You too.